Hey, welcome to the Crooked Pastor Podcast. I have the privilege today of, for the first time, but not for the last time, having my dear friend Kevin Navarro join us with Novo. United supports him and loves what he does, not just obviously because of me, but with other pastors all around the world. Kevin, tell us a little bit about what's going on in your life right now with this new season.
Well, it sounds good, Dale. Thanks so much. And just want to take a moment not only to thank you, brother, but to thank United as well for supporting us as a missionary family. 3 years ago, God called us out of a 23-year pastorate to serve pastors and Christian leaders, missionaries, chaplains, counselors. And I always put it this way. We used to pastor a local church, and now we pastor pastors, my wife and I, and she has a real heart for pastors' wives and have a real heart for Christian leaders. So anyway, that's what we're doing in this season of our life, is we are coming alongside Christian leaders really all over the globe and just befriending them. A friend of mine just recently said, described what we do this way. He used the Gaelic term Anam Cara, which means soul friend. I really resonated with that, and really has to do with someone who is walking with you along the journey, asking questions, being attentive, being present, listening to your story, to your hopes and dreams, but also be in a place to deposit anxiety and worries and fears and cares and concerns.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of work we do. I mean, we do mentoring, we do coaching, we do spiritual direction, but most importantly, I view what I do as being a soul friend to various leaders. Yeah, so
well, you've certainly been that for me in my life, Kevin. So I'm really, I'm blown away by that and grateful for the privilege. So yeah, in your text this morning, you mentioned that you've been that right now you're kind of connecting with about 30 leaders. I mean, talk to me about that. What are some of the things that they're facing, and how are you dealing with all of this?
Yeah, certainly. Well, first of all, we serve with a mission agency, Novo, which used to be known as Church Resource Ministries. And we have 565 missionaries in about 115 countries and various global affiliates. And I serve on a team under one of the collectives that focuses on church renewal, but we specifically we serve on a 14-member team called Imago Christi, which means the image of Christ. And we always talk about the image of God. We've been created in the image of God, but the Spirit is forming the image of Christ in us.
Yeah, so good.
And, so we do work together as a team. First and foremost, we travel all over the world with them. We do retreats, we do prayer conferences, we do coaching together. We have a spiritual formation discovery that we do. We do various various aspects of coming alongside and mentoring together as a community in various parts of the world. But then each of the 14 members of this team, we each have our own individual coaching. And so, yeah, I have about 30 leaders that I'm working with, primarily pastors, but I also work with some directors of mission agencies, working with OMF, Overseas Missionary Fellowship. I also work with the Denver Rescue Mission. I'm currently working with some of the leadership team there, and they're in a completely different context of working with the least of these, those who are marginalized in particular during this whole coronavirus deal. You know, social distancing is not a reality for many of them.
Right.
One of the leaders I work with works with 500 men, and currently working on with Mayor Hancock of Denver to get these men into a larger facility where there's a little bit more social distancing, and eventually getting the women over to what used to be the Denver Coliseum, getting some help there. And so, again, I do a lot of listening and just frustration. And one of the leaders I was working with was sick, was isolated in quarantine for a while. Fortunately, he did not have COVID-19 or the coronavirus, and is back at work. But man, working with a lot of folks in close proximity, people that aren't. So anyway, so I get a chance to work with folks that are leading in shelter situations, again, mission agencies, primarily pastors. It's a tremendous privilege and I think further leaning into your question, Dale, what I see with a lot of pastors is obviously they've had to completely sort out their ecclesiology. What does it mean to gather as a local church with the whole restrictions that have been put in place, and how to keep their people safe, and how to do an online platform, just like everybody else has in various sectors, whether it's education or whatever, trying to figure out how to communicate, educate, preach, teach, lead worship through an online platform, but also to check in with their parishioners, with their congregants, how they're doing over the phone. And it's very different. It's very different for a lot of pastors. Probably one of the greatest stressors that a lot of pastors are dealing with are they feel a lot of pressure from the congregants as to on the leadership front, like what's next, what's going to happen next. And the reality is most pastors don't know what's going to happen next. They're trying to listen to the Spirit. None of us have ever been through this before. So this is all new territory. And so I always jokingly say, I don't think the Apostle Paul had a 15-year strategic plan to reach the Roman Empire. I think he just was listening to the Spirit, keeping in step with the Spirit. So much so we know this because he tried to get up to Bithynia a number of times, and the Holy Spirit said no, and gave him a Macedonian vision. And then, of course, he ended up in Macedonia. Likewise, pastors today are doing their best to listen to the Spirit, keep in step with the Spirit, and then lead their local churches accordingly with love, caring for their safety, and yet concerned with a number of issues. One thing I do want to say is we talk about our frontline workers today being our doctors, our nurses, and that's right. I have a number of family members that are working in that context right now. But I believe the next wave of frontline workers are going to be pastors, counselors, social workers. For example, just take funerals. So many people have not been able to have an appropriate or, what we would call a normal funeral. And so there's going to be a wave of memorial services and funerals coming down the pike in July, August of 2020, I would envision. So pastors are gearing up for that and preparing mentally and emotionally and spiritually for this kind of work. Issues of grief counseling is before us, just with the tremendous loss, not only loss of loved ones or loss of friends who have died to this in this global pandemic, but also loss of jobs. So just a ton of loss we're all processing, and what does it mean to grieve? And so anyway, again, I happen to have the privilege of doing work with folks that are in that context. And so I think it's, very significant, important stuff that we're all doing. So
what are some of your greatest challenges, Kevin, right now, personally?
Well, my greatest challenge, I think, is to continue to be attentive and to be present. I also feel a bit of fatigue.
I bet.
I love what I do. I feel so tremendously privileged and called to do what I do. But I feel a little bit of the cumulative fatigue just from all the different conversations I've had with different leaders that are just doing their best to kind of keep their head above water in this context. And so to do my own, make sure that I'm taking care of myself. So I have my own counselor and my own leadership coach and my own spiritual director. I have my team leader of Imago Christi. I just got off a prayer call with him. Susan and I, and Dale, you and Jen are a part of this. We have a prayer team, a 16-member prayer team that prays regularly for Susan and I. We just need a lot of prayer, but also just think like getting out walking, trying to pay attention to what we're eating, getting good sleep, paying attention to my own relationship with the Lord, as we call it, our own first order calling, which is to love the Lord with everything that is within us, because it's out of that place of being centered and being whole myself that I can offer something to other leaders.
Exactly. So lastly, as we close, what are some things that some opportunities you might think in anticipation as we come out of this that might be around the corner for yourself, for pastors? Just hit on a couple. Anything there?
Yeah, I think there's, the Lord he's always at work. The Father is always at work. And I recently saw something on Facebook somebody posted where it had two frames. The first frame was the devil looking at God and talking about, look how I've shut down the church, right? And in the other frame, it was God looking at the devil saying, what do you mean you shut down the church? I've just opened up the home church around the world in global context. And so I think that's that spoke to me, because what we might look as tremendous loss, and there is, I mean, we can't minimize that. I don't think the appropriate approach is just to be stoic and pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and keep plowing forward. I mean, but it's in our weaknesses that God is made strong. Uh,
Amen.
when we really don't have answers, that God comes into play. I mean, this is true, right? We just read the Bible. It's when God's people are backed into a corner that
Yep.
they turn to him and they look to him, and God does some of his best work at
Yes.
the darkest points in human history. I mean, we celebrated it not too long ago, Holy Week, and we go, what a terrible week. I mean, the rejection, the criticism, the betrayal, all of that. You're like, what is God even up to here? Well, he did his greatest redemptive work at one of the darkest moments in
Yeah.
human history.
Yeah.
So I think that's always important, that we pay attention to what is God up to, not just what's going on politically, not just what are the health experts saying. I mean, we need to pay attention to all that stuff too. But there's another question we need to constantly be asking, is what is God up to? And I believe God is up to doing something absolutely phenomenal. I was on a call with a number of our Novo missionaries, 155. I mean, we had a Zoom call, 155 people dialing in, not just what do I want to say, chat rooms, so to speak.
Right.
So it wasn't just 155 people. It was many times, one of the missionaries and their spouse were missionary and their kids. And so all together, I don't know, there's hundreds of us that were on this Zoom call, but we got a chance to hear what God was doing in Italy, in Honduras, in Thailand, in Bali. And we're all in this global pandemic together, but God is doing some phenomenal stuff in terms of
Praise God for that. Yeah.
for
Thank you,
people to hear
Father.
the gospel, and for people to experience. I'll give you one example. In Lithuania, I was in Lithuania last year, and one of the pastors I spent time with, he has a church of about 150 people. Since they went to their online platform, they regularly have 900 people dialing in into this church in Kaunas, Lithuania, listening to this pastor's sermon. Lord only knows what's going to happen as a result of this. We can't.
Wow.
One
Yes.
thing I do want to say, one of my favorite sayings from Corrie ten Boom, is she said that we will never know that Jesus is all we need until Jesus is all we have. And so when we're backed in a corner and it just looks bleak and it looks like, it's a complete mess. People are out of employment. People have died. I mean, it's really unfortunate, right? On a global scale, but God is doing some of his best work,
Yeah.
I believe. And so, I think we should look forward with anticipation. Yeah.
I agree with that. This has been the Crooked Pastor Podcast. Check us out both on this Facebook page, but also at the YouTube channel, Crooked Pastor. Looking forward to dialoguing more with more missionaries and more of our ministry friends in the future at this very location. Thanks for joining us. Kevin, thanks for taking the time. Love you, man. Grateful for you and looking forward to what God's got for us together in the future.
Thanks, Dale.